भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ आप्यायन्तु ममाङ्गानि वाक्प्राणश्चक्षुश्रोत्रमथो बलमिन्द्रियाणि च सर्वाणि। सर्वं ब्रह्म उपनिषदं माहं ब्रह्म निराकुर्यां मा ब्रह्म निराकरोद। निराकरणमस्त्वनिराकरणं मेस्तु तदात्मनि निरतेय उपनिषत्सु धर्मास्ते मयि सन्तु ते मयि सन्तु। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
We'll chant part 3 of Kenopanishad.
ब्रह्महद्देवेभ्यो विजिज्ञे तस्य ब्रह्मणो विजये देवा महीयन्त। त ऐक्षन्तास्माकमेवायं विजयोऽस्माकमेवायं महिमेति। तद्वैषां विजज्ञौ तेभ्योः प्रादुर्बभूव तन्न व्यजानत किमिदं यक्षमिति। तेऽग्निमब्रुवन् जातवेद एतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति। तदभ्यद्रवत्तमभ्यवदत् कोऽसीत्यग्निर्वा अहमस्मीत्यब्रवीत् जातवेदा वा अहमस्मीति। तस्मिन् गुस्त्वयि किं वीर्यमित्यपीदगो सर्वं दहेयं यदिदं पृथिव्यामिति। तस्मै तृणं निदधावेतद्दहेति तदुपप्रेयाय सर्वजवेन तन्न शशाक दग्धुं सतत एव निववृतेनैतदशकं विज्ञातुं यदेतद्यक्षमिति। अथ वायुमब्रुवन् वायवेतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति। तदभ्यद्रवत्तमभ्यवदत् कोऽसीति वायुर्वा अहमस्मीत्यब्रवीन्मातरिष्वा वा अहमस्मीति। तस्मिन् गुस्त्वयि किं वीर्यमित्यपीदगो सर्वमाददीय यदिदं पृथिव्यामिति। तस्मै तृणं निदधावेतदादत्स्वेति तदुपप्रेयाय सर्वजवेन तन्न शशाका दातुं सतत एव निववृतेनैतदशकं विज्ञातुं यदेतद्यक्षमिति। अथेन्द्रमब्रुवन् मघवन्नेतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति। तदभ्यद्रवत्तस्मात्तिरोदधे स तस्मिन्नेवाकाशे स्त्रियमाजगाम बहुशोभमानामुमागुहैमवतीं तागुहोवाच किमेतद्यक्षमिति।
See, with reference to Abrahamic faiths like Christianity, there is this concept of monotheism and polytheism. Monotheism is that philosophy or ideology which accepts the existence of one God. That one God and only God is the Father in heaven, as that is given in their scriptures. And polytheism refers to worshipping of many gods, which was all described as pagan religions prior to the advent of Christianity. At various places in the world, through various civilizations, people have been worshipping many gods. We see the history of Greeks, we see the history of Egypt. Everywhere, these concept of worshipping various gods. There's a god for love, god for victory, god for various things. Like that, gods are worshipped. So this is called as polytheism. So polytheism and monotheism are Western constructs. After the Westerners came to study Hinduism, being in India for a long time, they tried to fit in Hinduism also into either of these categories, and they categorized Hinduism under polytheism because we also worship many gods. But it is a wrong construct, it's a wrong type of thinking. Monotheism, polytheism, etc. does not fit into our philosophy. According to Vedanta, the whole is called as Brahman, and Brahman alone exists. What we see as the multifaceted universe here is also nothing but the manifestation of the Supreme Brahman. The individual essentially is Supreme Brahman only. Therefore, the gods which are said to be responsible as various powers manifest in the universe are also nothing but the Supreme Brahman's manifestation only. So nothing other than Brahman is acceptable. From the point of view of relative existence, we do understand the three concepts of Jiva, individual, Jagat, universe, and Ishvara, the Supreme God. The Supreme God is Brahman. But that Supreme God is never something separate, which the Westerners understand. In other words, the Father in heaven is completely transcendental entity. He has created the universe and made it operate like a toy. A key has been given and the toy is spinning. He has nothing immanent in the world. That is why there is no concept of seeing God in each and every being. That is not there. But as far as Brahman or Supreme God in Hinduism is concerned, He is within and without. There is nothing or nowhere that He is not present. So therefore He is the all-pervading entity. So this must be very clearly understood. And if at all you want to fit it into any of the definitions in English, you can use the term polymorphic. Polymorphism means one becoming many. That's all. Even that is not completely capturing, because the Brahman remain in its pristine form as it is. Even as it appears itself as the manifestation of the entire universe, it does not change its original supreme nature also. So therefore this cannot be captured in any words. But if at all any argument about polytheism, monotheism comes, do not get into it in terms of trying to take one side or the other. It is not the onus of us to fit ourselves into the definition set by others. Rather, try to understand it as it is. And if at all you are trying to explain to others, you have to explain to others in this term only. So the closest that comes is polymorphism. But throughout, from the Vedas, in the Upanishads also, and later in the Itihasa and Purana, we do see various stories given. And in the story, lots of gods and goddesses are there. In fact, it is this type of stories, very type of worships, very type of rituals which has actually made Hinduism's roots stronger. By mere understanding of the Upanishad and sustaining the philosophy through it, which is the base, it is not accessible for each and everybody. So, it is said, the knowledge is given at the highest level through the Vedas and the Upanishads. It is called as a Prabhu Samhita. The knowledge is given straight, directly as an instruction, as though a master telling a servant. Now who can understand it is somebody who is evolved at a higher level. But then Smritis and other texts like Bhagavad Gita come down a little bit, and they are trying to interpret Vedas according to time and tell us the same truth according to the time and circumstance. So Suhrut Samhita is like a friend telling a friend. That is much closer, but even then it is not available for the masses in terms of direct understanding. So Itihasa and Purana is that type of teaching is called as Kanta Samhita, where a wife tells a husband, which is very easy, which is very smooth, which is conveying the message in a very nice way, which nobody can deny, in that sort of a thing. So you will find that lot of stories, lot of symbolic metaphors, everything is given in the so many Puranas, and mainly these two Itihasas, Ramayana, Mahabharata. Its voluminous, huge. What is the purpose of these stories? That also through trained teachers and masters that we understand, in certain places the stories can be understood as it is. The episodes has to be understood as it is. When we see Rama's character and his conduct in Ramayana, it should be understood how a man should conduct himself. So Rama meeting Guha talks about extreme easy nature of God, extreme friendship, etc., brotherhood, irrespective of what jati a person is. So there is no need to get into extreme symbolism there and try to find out what is Guha representing or what is Rama representing. But in the overall picture of Ramayana, apart from the story, you will also find symbolism. Rama is the Paramatma, Sita is the Jivatma. All this symbolism is also relevant. So when you see a Vibhishana's Sharanagati or surrender, when you see Sugriva's friendship with Rama, when you see Lakshmana's service to Rama, Bharata's bhakti to Rama, these have to be understood and appreciated per se. And then you will be able to feel it. Then only you will be able to read and understand the Itihasa in its right spirit. After that, if you are able to see the overall picture, there will be some symbolism and metaphors also. So you can derive the message at that level also. But don't say it is only symbolism. There is other aspects to it. But there are certain stories in which there is deep mystic symbolism. On the face value of it, there may be absurdity. When we see stories like Bhasmasura, let us say, it comes in some Purana. Now, whether really Bhasmasura existed or which yuga, or which loka he existed, and it's a very interesting story, but you can tell that story to a child, you can enact that story in a drama or a play also. It is very, very interesting. But definitely, much later, question will arise as to who is this Bhasmasura? What is it actually representing? Who is Shiva in that? Who is Vishnu in that? What is the Mohini avatar in that? So there is a extreme beautiful symbolism which explains a tattva, which explains a deep philosophical concept. So such stories are meant to deeper contemplation and thinking. And certain stories are given in such absurd language also sometimes that we see that it is meant for thinking. It is meant for understanding what is the hidden message in it. So sometimes there is a message in it, sometimes there is a symbolism in it, sometimes there is a direct understanding of it, sometimes a combination of these. How do we know what is to be applied where? It is only through satsang, it is only through interpretation of great masters that it can be done. We cannot do it as, meaning when we get into the spirit of it completely and we are thorough with the knowledge of Vedanta and the overall picture of what Hinduism says, then you will be able to maybe study the scriptures and understand them directly later on. But otherwise, it is through the interpretation of the great masters that we understand. Now, since this story comes in Upanishad, since this story forms part of the Vedas themselves, and Vedas and Upanishads are known for their brevity and the tattva that they are talking about, and surely the theme of the Upanishads is Brahman, there is deep, deep symbolism in this type of stories here. Now we studied the story last time that with the help of Brahman, the supreme God, the gods, plural, the gods won a victory over Asuras. And they were celebrating. As I said, the gods in plurality has to be understood as manifest powers. The manifest power of each and every aspect of the universe has to be understood as part of the totality. Only then it will make sense. Independently, Indra or independently Vayu or independently Agni have no existence apart from being the Anga or part of the totality here. Now here, these gods led by Indra, they were on a victory procession after the victory, and there are various gods, multitude of gods, and all of them were praising themselves and praising Vayu, praising Agni, praising Indra, praising themselves because they have won the battle against the Asuras, and they said this victory is ours. So in other words, in that victory they forgot the main cause of the victory, who was nothing but the Supreme Brahman. Therefore, at this juncture, Brahman wanted to just indicate or teach them a lesson, and it appears as an apparition or a yaksha, a figure. And when they suddenly see this figure, the gods are confused whether it is the enemy still lurking or they can't find out who that is. So they first request Agni to go and find out who this person is, who this figure is. As Agni approaches, softly that apparition asks this question, who are you? So he says, I am Jataveda, I am Agni. What is your power? So Agni says, my power is that I can burn anything in this world. Anything in this universe I can burn it. That is my power. A small blade of grass is kept in front of the god Agni, and he says, try to burn this. Agni tries, and then with full force he tries. Not even 1 inch is burnt. So embarrassed and humiliated, Agni returns back and informs the gods that I don't know what or who this apparition is. Then the gods request Vayu. Vayu is wind god. Wind god to go and find out who this yaksha is. Vayu also goes with great force. As he is approaching the yaksha is posing the question, who are you? So he says, I am Vayu, I am Matarishva. Matarishva means I am mover in the sky. What is your power? What is your viryam? What is your power? I can blow away anything. Each and everything cannot stand my force. I can blow away everything. So the same blade of grass is kept in front of Vayu and said, try your force on this. And Vayu tries with all his might. The blade doesn't move even 1 centimeter. And accepting his defeat, he returns back and he submits to the gods that I can't find out who this yaksha is. Then finally, the gods request their leader, Indra himself, to go to the place and find out who that yaksha is. The only difference in the approach of Indra is that he goes with more humility to find out. He is not going with that I have this power or I am the leader. That sort of a haughtiness or arrogance is not there. He goes with humility. As he goes, the apparition or the yaksha disappears from there. It withdraws itself and he is not able to see anything. Instantly, in that same place, a dazzling beauty in the form of goddess Parvati, Uma, who is daughter of Himavan, Shakti. She appears and her appearance is very bright and dazzling. To her, Indra very humbly submits himself and asks this question, who was that? Who was that figure who was here? And there the chapter ends. There this part of the Upanishad ends. The answer to that comes in part 4. Answer to the question of Indra comes in part 4. Sa Brahmeti Hovacha begins the next. She is saying that was Brahman. And that is how Indra came to understand who that was. This is the story. Story is over. Now, what is the symbolism behind it? This is what I asked you to think about. So, the gods' victory over Asuras, Deva's victory over Asuras, what does that indicate? Correct. Good over evil in general. But subjectively?
The lower, the base qualities are taken over with the sattva.
Right. So, first there is, before we launch on a spiritual program, we need to conquer our negative tendencies first. Only then the spirit of inquiry and pursuit of God and all those things it's going to come. In the Navaratri celebrations, one way to look at it is that first 3 days are dedicated to Durga, then next 3 days to Lakshmi, then to Saraswati. What it means is Durga is invoked to kill all the negative tendencies in us at all the 3 levels, 3 days. Having done that, only positive qualities can be cultivated in us, which is Lakshmi. Lakshmi is just not representing the wealth that we understand as money, wealth of qualities. Forgiveness and other great qualities have to be inculcated, and these qualities are definitely essential. Just as we saw before Tattva Bodha, some qualities are essential for the pursuit of study itself, and these qualities cannot be established in a person unless he conquers anger and jealousy and other negative tendencies. So therefore, victory of God over the Devas, over the Asuras, represent that a man tries to begin his real spiritual quest or spiritual journey only when the negative tendencies in him are conquered. And what is interesting is, whether you understand it or not, whether we appreciate it or not, what helps us conquer this is actually the Supreme Self. In other words, suddenly one day, you don't get up and you have conquered anger and you have conquered jealousy. It doesn't happen like that. When does it happen? It is only through sustained effort, and that effort is triggered actually by some knowledge somewhere. See, unless a person understands Atma Buddhi Prasadajam, says Gita, that the prasada of your own intellect, and the intellect is opened up or lit up when it is able to understand the knowledge of the self. So it is through some contact with the higher that you are able to conquer the lower tendencies. But then what happens, once you have reached certain position, you might really forget the real pursuit and be stagnant at that level. In other words, no doubt victory over negativity is some step, but from there you have to go further into the search of Brahman. That is why, having acquired the wealth of qualities, Saraswati, which is knowledge, has to be gained, and then comes Vijayadashami, which is the victory of conquering of ego and self-realization. Self-realization is the aim. Aim is self-realization, but it is in stages that we go in the progress towards that. So therefore, when a person is in that victory mode, suddenly a question is made to ask. So here it is there in the form of apparition that it appears. And then suddenly the question comes. So definitely in some time within us the question comes as to, who is this God? What is this? I am not able to understand. There is something beyond this world, or is there entity? This type of a real enquiry comes. And therefore we get the name God through our Guru or through these scriptures. We understand Ishvara or God, or there is a tattva like that. But the enquiry is, who is that? In the second chapter of Vedanta Treatise, Swamiji says, in the mathematics, X is given as the starting point of the theorem. Let the height of the room be x. X is not the answer, but x is a supposition, and then you have to find out x. Similarly, God is a supposition for our intellect to probe further and understand what it is. When that understanding comes and the spiritual journey begins, first who goes there is Agni to find out. Agni represents speech, and speech represents all organs of action. In Shastras, it is a style to use one organ of action, the chief organ of action, to accommodate all organs of action. We say why speech? Because we say fiery speech, hot words. Boss fired him, we say. Boss fired him means what? He shouted, words only it is. So Agni is equivalent to speech. And therefore, Agni's approach to find out the yaksha or the apparition can be equated to the karma that a man does in the beginning, the rituals that he does, which is essential, which is required. But what that story indicates is that through the organs of action, you cannot ascertain who that God is. In other words, action does not reveal the self. Action and knowledge are opposed in nature. Action cannot reveal the self, and yet you have to do action. Yet we have to do rituals. Without that, and then this, so therefore the first aspect that we understand of the episode is that Agni cannot find out who he is. Therefore your organs of action is useful as far as doing rituals is concerned, but it is not useful to find out what that self is. It cannot pinpoint that self. And second aspect is, without the power of Brahman, the organs of actions are ineffective. This is the theme that this Upanishad is saying in part 1 and 2. What makes you act as Brahman? You cannot capture action by speech. You cannot capture Brahman by speech. You cannot capture Brahman by any action. You cannot contact the Brahman by your action or the body. This is the episode that Agni has to return back. And then comes the subtler level of our sadhana. Vayu is considered subtler than Agni in this context, because Vayu represents prana, which represents and includes the organs of perception. So after you have finished the karma extrovertedly with the organs of action, that is the time you can use subjective worship using organs of perception. It is not easy for a person to do this in the initial stage of his spiritual journey. We need to do a lot of karma. Having exhausted the vasanas a bit, you are able to do some subjective worship. And even that organs of perception cannot reveal the self to you. That is what is indicated by that Vayu could not find out who that apparition is. And then second aspect is the same, that what makes Vayu function is the Brahman. What gives the power to your organs of action, what organs of perception, and what gives power to your prana, that supreme power is Brahman. That is why when he withdrew a little bit, not even 1 inch of the blade could be blown away. It is not possible. The Vayu with all his Viryam was ineffective without the support of Brahman. So what really makes things possible for organs of perception is also Brahman. This is indicated by the episode of Vayu going and coming back. And then really after this is the real inquiry begins, where with the combination of extreme bhakti and the inquiry at the subtle intellect level is indicated by the leader of gods, the leader of organs of action and perception, and beyond that is the mind and intellect. So here in this context, Indra represents the mind and intellect, and he approaches with humility. So he bows down in surrender to the Supreme Self and goes near to find out. And that here the indication that mind and intellect also cannot contact Brahman is indicated in the other way, that the Brahman disappears, the apparition disappears. So it is not possible for mind and intellect also to contact Brahman or reach Brahman. In other words, it is not within the grasp of your feeling or thinking. But Indra's pursuit was not a complete failure like the earlier two pursuits. Indra, what he did is that he stood there and persisted. When he stood there and persisted, the answer to him came indirectly. Indirectly through the mouth of the great goddess Parvati, Uma. Uma is indicated here as Haimavati. Haimavati means daughter of Himalayas, daughter of Himavan. Himalayas is considered god. Himavan is the entity which represents Himalayas, and Haimavati is his daughter. What she represents? She represents the Vedic wisdom, the Upanishadic wisdom. Why Upanishads and Vedas were born in the Himalayas? The rishis did tapas in the Himalayan jungles and valleys, and they found out the truth. So the Upanishad is that which will reveal Brahman, and that Upanishad is very beautiful. It is bedecked with jewels. It is the same indication in Bhasmasura story also, but we will not go into that now. So the Upanishadic wisdom is indicated by Uma. Now the question is, why there is a pause? Why is not the answer revealed immediately? Anybody thought of it, or you read through the commentary? What is the reason?
I've read through it, so basically after contemplation and sadhana, then you realize.
Yes. The pause indicates the pause of the silence in the meditation, ultimately. And also the pause in terms of there is a time gap between what the Shastra gives us the knowledge and the realization of the self. So therefore, the inquiry begins. In other words, once the master says that you are the self, you must instantly realize the self. It doesn't happen. Even in the Upanishad, in the portion of Chandogya where the great statement Tattvamasi is given, the father gives his son the knowledge. He gives a example and finally he says Tattvamasi. Then he gives another example and another statement. He says Tattvamasi. Like that, it has to be told 11 times for him. The one who is a prepared student there, why it is coming at, and it is said at the end of 11th he realized the self. This is the indication in the story. What it means is, immediately when the master says Tattvamasi, we are startled, or maybe some indication or some direction or something is given, but we need to really work on it. It is a change in the thought process that takes time. Now we need not worry about how long it will take now. What it means is there is a time gap between what we receive as a knowledge and how we convert it into wisdom, and finally that revelation of the self comes. So therefore, the revealing of the self through the Shastras, what she gives us answer as that was Brahman. Sa Brahmeti Hovacha. That comes in the part 4. This is the story. And then it concludes by saying, amongst all the gods, Agni, Vayu and Indra are the great gods. Because they at least made an attempt, and in that order of subtlety. And among these three, Indra is considered the greatest, because he was the closest and he was able to pursue and find out. That's how the thing concludes. So this story is a very great metaphor, giving the same theme of the Upanishad, Kenopanishad, but in a way that even a child can understand. So this is Arthavada. Arthavada means a symbolic way of indicating the same truth here.
So,
Yeah.
this you're comparing this Yaksha coming up and comparing it with Vishwarupa Darshana of Krishna going to Arjuna. There he is considered as an avatar and showing his rupa. Here, this Yaksha is not considered as an avatar. So now, comparing in what category do we put it? Like a monologue type of thing, one person under thinking of something like an coming in his imagination, or is it really a second entity happening like Vishwarupa?
No. This has nothing to do with Vishwarupa. That is a sort of episode in the Mahabharata in Bhagavad Gita itself, and where you can say Krishna, who is considered as the avatar, and then showing his Vishwarupa, etc. Here it is just a symbolic story. That's about all. Whether we cannot even go into the inquiry as to when and how it happened, or what is the time period, what is the loka behind it. So that thing doesn't apply here. It is a very beautiful story as far as indicating a great subtle message of the Upanishad. So there is nothing beyond that we must see here in this. We'll chant mantra 1.
ब्रह्महद्देवेभ्यो विजिज्ञे तस्यः ब्रह्मणो विजये देवा महीयन्त त ऐक्षन्तास्माकमेवायं विजयोऽस्माकमेवायं महिमेति ब्रह्महद्देवेभ्यो विजिज्ञे तस्यः ब्रह्मणो विजये देवा महीयन्त त ऐक्षन्तास्माकमेवायं विजयोऽस्माकमेवायं महिमेति.
Verily, Brahman won a victory for the gods. In that victory of Brahman, the gods indeed became elated. They thought, this victory is ours. This glory indeed is ours. So, everything is covered. There's no more explanation. What we have to remember is, even in our worldly pursuit, Karma Yoga, see, this is not the theme of the Upanishad. I'm just deriving a message, that's all. Even Karma Yoga that we do becomes a worship. Karma becomes a worship only when you dedicate your actions to God. In a relative level, you say dedicate the action to a supreme goal or an ideal or something like that. But essentially, the essence of Karma Yoga is the actions that are done by me is not for me, it is for you. And the results that come out of our action is also your prasad. This is the ultimate surrender of action towards God. Then it becomes a worship. Then it becomes a Karma Yoga. But having done everything, the ego will come definitely, and it will claim proprietorship over the action, and then it will try to enjoy the fruit of action as itself. So here, the victory over the asuras for the devas is by the help of Brahman, but in that moment they forgot and claimed that victory to be theirs. So the victory is indeed ours, the glory is indeed ours. This is the state of mind of the devas. And also the experiences in the world and the conquering of the negative tendencies is required for spiritual pursuit. That we have to know. Mantra 2.
तद्वैषां विजज्ञौ तेभ्योः प्रादुर्बभूव तन्न व्यजानत किमिदं यक्षमिति तद्वैषां विजज्ञौ तेभ्योः प्रादुर्बभूव तन्न व्यजानत किमिदं यक्षमिति.
Verily, that Brahman knew their vanity, that indeed appeared before them. They did not actually know what that spirit was. So Brahman wanted to teach them a lesson. It knew what their state of mind was. Therefore, it appeared as a yaksha or spirit in the sky, like a figure in the sky.
Sorry.
Yes.
A question comes to mind. Well, confuses a little bit. Because when we talk about Brahman, not taking any sides. Okay. And then when there is a fight between the good and the evil, why does Brahman favor the good? Because per se, it is the qualities which I don't know if I'm able to get my question.
Correct. See, in the fight between Pandavas and Kauravas, that Krishna was neutral is very clear because he did not take part in the war. He said he will not take up any weapons and fight. In fact, he was sleeping one day. He was available for both Arjuna and Duryodhana. And when he woke up, he saw Arjuna first and he asked, "What do you want?" He said, "I am on one side and my army is on the other side." Arjuna chose Krishna and Duryodhana chose the army. This is the story. Therefore, in the war, it was Krishna who made everything possible. He helped the Pandavas win the war because Pandavas sought Krishna. That is the thing. He is saying, "Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajameham," says Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Whatsoever, howsoever people approach me, I am available for them in that form, in that way. So he is there available. But his nature is being neutral. He doesn't favor this or that. But if people require my help, I am available there. If they say I don't need you, okay, there also I am a witness to them. That's about all. So this is what it is. People get confused as to, in each and every stage we see that when the gods are helpless, they take this Mahavishnu or Shiva in certain things and then they take that victory. What does it mean is, even when conquering the negative tendencies within you, it is not possible for your intellect to do unless otherwise it is attuned to the self in that higher way. So therefore it seems as though God is favoring one against the other. It is not so. It is as per your demand, as per your requisition, as per your approach, he is available. Ocean is there. If you go and take water in a small pitcher, that much only water you collect. If you go in a tanker and you bring it, that much water you get. But ocean is infinite. Ocean says, howsoever people approach me and take, I am available for them. Like that it is. So the victory of gods over the asuras is because gods directly or indirectly seek that help, and that is how it is coming. And why not asuras then? They will not ask. If they are asking, they are not asuras. They are haughty people. They are having that ego. When that ego is manifest fully, they will not bend it down towards the self. It is a very interesting story comes in Bhagavata. There was this god. It's a very thought-provoking story also. There is a asura called Vrittasura. I think his name is Vritrasura or Vrittasura. He was an extreme devotee of the Supreme Lord. In this case, Vishnu. Outwardly, he is an asura. But his mind only God knows. That sort of bhakta he was. His surrender was complete. And the prophecy is that Indra will kill him with Vajra. He knew that also. And in the battle, Indra is challenging him. And he is also challenging Indra. And before the war, he only utters a prayer of surrender to the Supreme Lord. And that mantra only reveals his mind actually. That type of surrender probably no god or rishi also says. He comes in the lineage of Prahlada maybe. That's why he is like that. And in the battle what happens? With all his power he swallows Indra along with the Airavata elephant. This is the story. And since the prophecy is true, Indra cuts open him with the Vajra, comes out and that Asura is killed. Now, when you study the story, the confusion arises as to Indra no doubt is king of gods, and we see many episodes that Indra also committing certain blunders and going through punishment, curses, all those things. Indra up and down we see in many episodes. But we don't see like who was an extreme bhakta like Prahalada, and Prahalada we never call him as an asura. Prahalada is considered the greatest of devotee. Like that, this Vritrasura was a great devotee. Then his lineage comes, I think, Mahabali, who was again a great devotee. Now, this, who was his complete devotee and who had surrendered unto him, why as though God let him down? And why was victory granted to Indra? Indra was also maybe devotee of Lord, but not definitely as to this level. This doubt will be clarified only if you understand as to what internally they really seek. This person actually sought the Lord. Indra did not seek the Lord, he sought victory. So when victory was sought, victory was given to him. When God was sought, God himself gave himself to him. So apparently you will not find as though he is being defeated in a war. That is not the way to look at it. What internally he requires, what internally he wants, that was known only to him and that is granted. So definitely this Asura here is 1,000 times better than Indra in this context, in this episode. Like that it is. So if you don't get into the intricate detail, you will not know. Exactly like that, sometimes people say, in Treta Yuga, Ravana was there and Rama came and all the things were, why is not God appearing now? There is so many corruption here. It is not as easy as you think. Rama had to come only if the villain is as good as Ravana. You have to be as corrupt and as powerful and as, only then you will have Rama at the opposite side. It is not that casually you say something and you will be washed off by your own karma only. You don't need a God to come here. So you need to understand the depth of it, and there you will find it is through the help of surrender to the God, either directly or even for the time being, that the intellect is able to conquer the negativities. So that supreme entity which is neutral is available for you to use it in whichever way. And the moment you are able to touch, that same power comes to you and you are able to conquer. And the Asuric people don't do that. That is the reason.
So one question, small reservation. When will the Lord himself come and sort of act in a way to give a lesson, and when will he be as a madhyam, putting someone to do it? Because most of the time in this Vyavaharik level, when we see there is a madhyam somewhere, cause and effect taking place, some people coming and teaching lesson and going around. So the question is, when will the Lord descend and show
Really, we do not know, in the sense, what the stories and Puranas that we study now in Kali Yuga pertaining to the previous Yugas, or we do not know when and how they happened. There it is very clear in terms of who is the evil and who is the good, and when the balance between dharma and adharma goes beyond a point, then the God, I say Sambhavami Yuge Yuge Dharma Samsthapanate, that formula holds good. But it is said in Kali Yuga, instead of him directly manifesting, through sadhus, through saints, through various reformers from time to time, he only appears. He only appears through. Now, that is why post their life or even during their lifetime, they are also considered as avatara only. See, Shankaracharya was considered avatara of Shiva, and during his lifetime, his Shishya himself sings like this, Bhava Eva Bhavan, he says. Ramanujacharya was considered as an avatara of like Lakshmana, like Adishesha himself, Madhvacharya. So these are not anyway lesser than the Supreme God only. They are also avatars. And when we come to the level of bhaktas also, whether it is Paramahamsa or Eknath or Tyagaraja, all are considered. He was Valmiki only, Purandaradasa was Narada only, like that we say. So from our point of view, it really does not matter. In Kali Yuga probably the advent is much more, because probably the mixture of good and evil is also very intricate, and therefore for us from time to time, as though God sent these people or there a self-realized soul to help us. When it comes beyond a level where only he has to manifest himself, probably that time the avatar of Vishnu himself will be. Mantra 3.
तेऽग्निमब्रुवन् जातवेद एतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति तेऽग्निमब्रुवन् जातवेद एतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति.
They said to Agni, fire god, O Jataveda, ascertain this, what the spirit is. Agni agreed. Agni is called as Jataveda here. Jataveda means all-knower. That is why all-knower means the fire is representative of consciousness. So it is the light. Light knows everything. Like that, Agni knows everything. That is why he is called as Jataveda. There are many names. 30 to 33 names of Agni are there. One of the names is Jataveda. And Agni agrees to their request. Mantra 4 and 5 together.
तदभ्यद्रवत्तमभ्यवदत् कोऽसीत्यग्निर्वा अहमस्मीत्यब्रवीत् जातवेदा वा अहमस्मीति. तस्मिन् गुस्त्वयि किं वीर्यमित्यपीदगो सर्वं दहेयं यदिदं पृथिव्यामिति. तदभ्यद्रवत्तमभ्यवदत् कोऽसीत्यग्निर्वा अहमस्मीत्यब्रवीत् जातवेदा वा अहमस्मीति. तस्मिन् गुस्त्वयि किं वीर्यमित्यपीदगो सर्वं दहेयं यदिदं पृथिव्यामिति.
Agni hastened to that. The spirit softly asked him, Who are you? Agni replied, I am Agni, also I am Jataveda, all-knower. The spirit, what is the power in such as you? Agni, I can indeed burn up all this which is on this earth. So these two mantras talk about Agni's approach. It's very interesting. The gods are telling Agni, you go and find out who he is. But before Agni could ask a question, the spirit is asking, who are you? And he says, I am Agni, Jataveda, all-knower. What is the power that you have? Agni says, my power is that I can burn anything in the Prithvi. In the earth, anything, I am having the power to burn it all. Mantra 6.
तस्मै तृणं निदधावे तद्दहेति तदुपप्रेयाय सर्वजवेन तन्न शशाक दग्धुं सतत एव निववृतेनैतदशकं विज्ञातुं यदेतद्यक्षमिति. तस्मै तृणं निदधावे तद्दहेति तदुपप्रेयाय सर्वजवेन तन्न शशाक दग्धुं सतत एव निववृतेनैतदशकं विज्ञातुं यदेतद्यक्षमिति.
The spirit placed a straw before him and said, burn this. Having speedily approached it, he was not able to burn it. So he promptly returned from there, admitting, I could not ascertain this, what the spirit is. So this shows that the power of the organ of speech or organ of action is there because of the Brahman inside, is because of the Supreme Self inside. And second point is, Agni could not ascertain who it is. Therefore it is clear that the organs of action are ineffective as far as ascertaining what that self is. Organ of action cannot contact God. That is the second lesson.
Sir,
Yes.
so this is also trying to tell us that, Agni is at a higher level. So it's trying to, as and when you become contemplative, the first question comes to you is, who are you? Or a question something like that comes to you. And then you get again lost into your action. And then you realize that, you start with big ideas or whatever small ideas you are, and then you are not able to achieve.
No, what it means is, in terms of pursuit, all our actions are usually extrovert in nature. When the inquiry begins, we have to first perform rituals or karma yoga. Rituals, how it is to be done in the modern context, the spirit of it you can maintain and the actions may vary. But that is why in the next part they are going to say Agni is great. Agni, Vayu and Indra are great amongst all gods. That means your subjective pursuit starts with the rituals, but the actions cannot ascertain Brahman. Through action, you cannot reach Brahman. That is the point. Mantra 7.
अथवायुमब्रुवन् वायवेतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति अथवायुमब्रुवन् वायवेतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति.
Then the gods said to Vayu, wind god, O Vayu, ascertain this, what this spirit is. Vayu agreed. Mantra 8, 9 taken together.
तदभ्यद्रवत्तमभ्यवदत्कोऽसीति वायुर्वा अहमस्मीत्यब्रवीन् मातरिष्वा वा अहमस्मीति. तस्मिन् गुस्त्वयि किं वीर्यमित्यपीदगो सर्वमाददीय यदिदं पृथिव्यामिति. तदभ्यद्रवत्तमभ्यवदत्कोऽसीति वायुर्वा अहमस्मीत्यब्रवीन् मातरिष्वा वा अहमस्मीति. तस्मिन् गुस्त्वयि किं वीर्यमित्यपीदगो सर्वमाददीय यदिदं पृथिव्यामिति.
Vayu hastened to that. The spirit softly asked him, Who are you? Vayu replied, I am Vayu, also I am Matarishva. Matarishva means mover in the sky. The spirit, what is the power in such as you? Vayu, I can indeed blow away all this which is on this earth. So next it was the chants of Vayu. Vayu represents the organs of perception here. Prana, which includes the organs of perception. So he went based on the request of the gods, and to him the same question was asked as to who are you. He said, I am Matarishva. Matarishva means one who moves in the sky. And the spirit is asking, what is your power? I can blow away everything. There is a proverb in Indian language and Sanskrit also, probably from here only it has come. Tena vina trinam api na chalati. Without him, not even a blade of grass will move. This is where it comes from. So, Vayu is asked, what is your power? He says, I can blow away everything. So the Brahman is keeping the same blade of grass in front of Vayu. Mantra 10.
तस्मै तृणं निदधाभे तदा दत्स्वेति तदुपप्रेयाय सर्वजवेन तन्न शशाका दातुं सतत एव निववृतेनैतदशकं विज्ञातुं यदेतद्यक्षमिति. तस्मै तृणं निदधाभे तदा दत्स्वेति तदुपप्रेयाय सर्वजवेन तन्न शशाका दातुं सतत एव निववृतेनैतदशकं विज्ञातुं यदेतद्यक्षमिति.
The spirit placed a straw before him and said, blow this away. Having speedily approached it, he was not able to blow it away. So he promptly returned from there, admitting, I could not ascertain this, what the spirit is. So again, like Agni, Vayu came back. This episode also says the same two lessons, that without the power of Brahman, it is not possible for the organs of perceptions to function. Second, organs of perceptions are per se ineffective in revealing Brahman. And in the order of subtlety, first it is actions, which is rituals and karma yoga. Then comes the subjective worship, which is using the perceptions to go towards the Brahman. So first we are extroverted and we do lot of actions. Then relatively when we become introverted, subjective worship becomes easier. So Vayu represents that. Then the next episode of Indra going.
अथेन्द्रमब्रुवन् मघवन्नेतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति तदभ्यद्रवत्तस्मात् तिरोदधे. अथेन्द्रमब्रुवन् भगवन्नेतद्विजानीहि किमेतद्यक्षमिति तथेति तदभ्यद्रवत् तिरोदधे.
Then the god said to Indra, O Magavan, Magavan means worshipful one, ascertain this, what the spirit is. Indra agreed. He hastened to that, it disappeared from him. So Indra approaches, now Indra is the leader, he is the ultimate god amongst the set of gods there, he is their leader. He goes there to find out, but when he goes there, the Yaksha disappears, he withdraws himself from the scene. So this shows that mind and intellect is also incapable of contacting Brahman. In other words, Brahman cannot be an object in your intellect or thought. Brahman cannot be an object in your feeling. With your mind and intellect, you cannot capture Brahman, touch Brahman. It is that very power which makes you feel. It is the very power which makes you think. But here, when he went, the Brahman disappeared. But what happens there is interesting. As he stands there in that same place, some other form comes. That form is of Uma, which is the last mantra in this.
सतस्मिन्नेवाकाशे स्त्रियमाजगाम बहुशोभमानामुमागुहैमवतीं तागुहोवाच किमेतद्यक्षमिति. सतस्मिन्नेवाकाशे स्त्रियमाजगाम बहुशोभमानामुमागुहैमवतीं तागुहोवाच किमेतद्यक्षमिति.
In that very space appeared an extremely beautiful woman, Uma, daughter of Himavan, Himalaya mountain. He asked her what was the spirit. That spirit which was here, what was it? He is asking in the past tense because so therefore what it means, when a person goes beyond the ritualistic patterns and subjective worship and he is at the level of now study, reflection and contemplation, there is a persistent Shraddha in trying to know. When that is there, the Shastras appear, and through the Guru, when we listen to the Shastras, it is going to ultimately reveal what that Supreme Brahman is. But very interestingly, as we discussed before, this part 3 concludes here with the question. Answer to this comes in part 4. Why they have placed it like that? One reason is that, as we said, there is a pause between the absorption of the knowledge and revealing of the self. Ultimately, up to the level of meditation, there is a pause in that silence before the self reveals itself. And secondly, without the indication of Uma, it was not possible for him to reach also. That means, without the help of the Shastras, so for us, Shastras have to be worshipped, they have to be pursued, they have to be respected. It is true that at the end of realization, you may go beyond the Vedas, you may go beyond Bhagavad Gita, everything. But till such point of time, hold on to the Shastras. It is through Shastras that we know. To explain what is there in this perceptible world, we have the knowledge of science and other knowledges here. And your pramana is your sight, but this is something imperceptible. How do we know? That the existence of Brahman itself is there is known through Shastras, and how it has to be reached, the path is also given in the Shastras only. So do not leave the Shastras at any point of time till you reach Brahman. After that, it's not that you can discard. After that, you may cross over it. That's all. You may cross over it, and that is the time actual subjective realization happens. So, without the grace of Uma, without the grace of Parvati, without the grace of that Shakti, it is not possible. Therefore, hold on to her. That is why in our Sampradaya or tradition, we always worship Vishnu, Lakshmi together. Shiva and Parvati together, Brahma and Saraswati together. It is as though, see, the mother tells, even in the practical family where the mother tells, suppose if the son has to be corrected, she says, go and tell this to father, say sorry to him. Something like, it is through her grace that you get to the good books of the father also. So it can be taken in a bhakti form, but here it is very clear, she represents the Upanishadic wisdom. Without the knowledge of the Upanishad, without the Guru coming and telling us one day that you are the self, Tattvamasi, without that knowledge being revealed to us, it is impossible for us to leave the samsara and realize the self. So, worshipful in the form of Uma is the Shastras, which needs to be worshipped. Not worship means don't like in Sikh also, Guru Granth Sahib is the knowledge. But you don't make just an idol out of the book and do all the pujas to it only. It has to be, the real worship is when you study, when you reflect, when you contemplate. And through the process of Shravana, Manana and Nitidhyasana, the self reveals itself. Here also there is a subtle indication for both Vayu and Agni, the form was there, but they returned back. For Indra, the form disappeared. So the ultimate realization is actually the realization of the Nirguna Brahman within, which is without any form, etc. So however much, you see, Dhruva was doing tapas in Bhagavat, we see that, and Dhruva was given this form of Vishnu to meditate. He was meditating, and finally when the form of Vishnu came, he says, no, my mother said it is something inside. So Vishnu has to reveal himself inside him. So what it means is ultimately it is a subjective realization within. So this story is actually very instructive at various levels here. Sir. Yes.
Is there a difference in approach? The story apparently looks same, like Agni went and he inquired and he got defeated, he came back. Vayu went and inquired, he got defeated and came back. Is there a difference in approach between the intent or the intent behind the approach of fire and this one?
No, as far as this is concerned, there is a slight difference only with reference to Indra. Other two are only in terms of degree it is different. That's all. There is no difference as far as the motive or intent or approach. The approach of Indra is only slightly different.
Another thing is, like once defeated, maybe what one can understand, because of the arrogance they came back. But otherwise, if you are in the process of your self-development, you may falter here and there many times. That means you are getting defeated in the pursuit. But then we do not stop our pursuit, we continue with that pursuit. But here they are not asking him certain time as to, means once defeated, okay, I surrender, please let me know.
Yeah, that is why. It is not possible for a person to be when he is at the level of rituals another thing to do. Therefore, what you say is falter and further surrendering is represented by Indra. So that is what is further revealed. Yeah. We'll conclude with the bhajans here.
Ananda Govinda Radhe Gopala Jayananda Mukunda Ananda Govinda मुकुन्द आनन्द गोविन्द राधे गोपाल जय नन्द मुकुन्द आनन्द गोविन्द राधे गोपाल गोविन्द माधव गोपाल केशव गोविन्द माधव गोपाल केशव गोपाल केशव गोपाल केशव
पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः